A lot of that imposter syndrome, a lot of that criticism stemmed from an unreasonable expectation that they attain a level of perfection. I always felt, walk with me in my world, honey, because you are so far and above so many people I encounter on a daily basis. I burst out of the gate like a hare. I had these dreams of this passive income, and I didn't allow myself the time to let that develop organically. I think that was my biggest error from the get-go. And it was hard to let those things go. You don't necessarily have to abandon the whole thing. If my business is my basketball court, then I'm moving around that space. You're not going from basketball to hockey. You're not going from hockey to football. So I'm not completely abandoning my values, my mission. You've just got to wait, and the right people are going to come. If you are okay to pivot, if something's not working, but don't compromise on your value. It's all about that connection. It's not about perfection. It's just the connection. The more I interact with the teachers I work with in Europe, English teachers in Brazil primarily, I believe the future of ELT is there. It's so much better than what a lot of people are getting in a classroom in Canada.
This is the Teacher Talking Time podcast.
On today's episode, we are very happy and proud to sit down with a fellow Canadian and entrepreneur, Catherine Angus. Catherine is an English language teacher and mentor who helps curious, ambitious teachers and advanced speakers keep their English current while calming, as she says, their inner critic and rediscovering their love of the language. In that mentoring, Catherine focuses on fluency, listening, and the many ways English is spoken globally, encouraging her learners to engage with real voices and authentic conversations. In addition to that mentoring that she offers, Catherine also hosts one of our favorite podcasts, Here You Go, HEAR, a podcast for intermediate and advanced learners featuring teacher interviews and reflective solo episodes. She also leads WILDE, WILDE, the Listening Festival, an 8-week course using women-hosted podcasts from around the world to strengthen listening and build confident voices in a supportive community. You can find Catherine's work all over the internet. Follow her on Instagram, Catherine Angus _ here you go. Go on her website, englishwithcatherine.com, or follow the podcast or send your students to her podcast as well. Here You Go podcast. And with that, here we go with today's episode. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Teacher Talking Time podcast, Catherine. It's really good to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to start by asking you a very direct question. And I don't know if you're going to have a clear-cut answer for us, but I'm going to go for it. What is one decision that you've made early in your business that kind of changed everything for you?
Yeah, there's many answers to that. I don't think there was just one decision. I think that the most pivotal decision was choosing to change my audience for the podcast. What I envisioned, and heard you say this before, Andrew, you might think you have the greatest idea, but it doesn't necessarily come to fruition. And what I had originally imagined for Here You Go podcast, that listenership didn't show up. And so very quickly, I learned who was showing up. And then that changed the format of the podcast, the content more than the format, the level in many ways. It went from a beginner, very basic level to an intermediate and advanced. Mm-hmm. And then everything changed. The people I taught changed, and my focus on listening more than anything else. So that was recognizing the audience that I'd imagined didn't want to buy tickets. So I had to move on to a different audience.
That's very important, but I would like to rewind for a moment
Okay.
here. So how did you get to that point? I think, what was your journey into education entrepreneurship? Like, how did everything start for you?
Sure. Well, I think like many people, how long do we have? It actually started in my 20s teaching English, but then I pivoted to a completely different career. And then I moved to the US, which then was a different career, my first business, which was not in education. But then a certain political candidate said something I found terrifically offensive. And I went to the new school and got certified to teach English again. And I was in classrooms and I felt like I was changing the world again. And that was really rewarding for a very long time. And then with the pandemic, everything moved online. And that was my first experience with, oh, I have even more freedom with what I'm doing. And I really liked it because I was pretty boxed in, as you are in a program, right? When you're teaching at a school or a college. And I had a really supportive director who allowed me to, he trusted me because I was getting results. And then when I moved back home to Canada, I was still online teaching classes. And I started to think about, okay, maybe I could try to go back into schools in Canada. And I had a physical reaction. I was like, no, I don't want to do that because I don't want to be boxed in to those benchmark tests. I knew that it would grate and that without the security of this director I'd had before who gave me free rein, I don't want to do that. And that was then when I started to step away from those classes and teach my own.
Huh. Did you, when you came to that realization that you wanted to build something of your own in education, did the people around you, maybe family, friends, your children even, did anyone around you think or thought that you were crazy, or did you find that people were very supportive from the start?
Oh, that's funny. I think teaching in general is not what, for some crazy reason, families don't cheer when people choose to go into education. It's not one of those fields that people really respect, which is maybe I wish the pandemic had been better at highlighting how critical. But I've got to credit my brother-in-law. He's a musician, and he was the first person I spoke to about doing a podcast. I'd been listening to podcasts since 2016. I loved them. I loved them as a tool journalists were using. And I said, am I crazy, Dan? Is this like a stupid idea? I'm in my 50s. And my son, he says to me, Mom, you're no Joe Rogan. Thank God I never wanted to be a Joe Rogan.
I was going to say, that might be it's a compliment, probably.
And so knowing from the get-go, no, I don't have aspirations to be an influencer, to be a megastar podcaster. But Dan, as a musician, he gave me advice that I hear over and over again. He said, look, when you make a song, when you make an album, you got no idea if people are going to like it. But you got to put it out there. Then you see. And so he's been my partner from the get-go. And he didn't think I was crazy. He and I, maybe we're getting into podcasting. I don't know if you want to go down that path right now. Dan, he was super helpful in my understanding what this thing could be and how I envisioned it. And that's something that I think if others were considering a podcast, I've got some things I'd love to share with people because I think we all know the stats. Very few podcasts go beyond a few episodes. And it's not, there are many factors as to why.
I think, Andrew, you have said that like most podcasts, I remember you always mentioning that.
It's kind of like a 7, in around the 7 number. Most podcasts don't make it past 7 episodes for many reasons.
Exactly.
I could guess. I don't know what the actual reasons are, but we can all guess what they are. That it's more work than you think it was, or people aren't listening, or you just don't like it as much as you thought you would. Or most people start a podcast with a friend, I think. And one of the people doesn't want to do it anymore, or who knows what. But I guess, Catherine, that leads to the question, how did you push past the 7-episode plateau?
a lot of planning beforehand and knowing what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. That was key because before we even recorded the first episode, Dan said to me, let's listen to a bunch of podcasts in the field, in this education. Let's listen to a bunch. And also, what do you listen to? What do you like about them? And so what was key for me from the get-go was audio quality. I had listened to so many podcasts that were poorly recorded, that were poorly edited, and I thought, why would people listen if it's going to be annoying? And so I prioritized that, and he showed me what I would need to do to make that happen. And I said, whoa, I am not interested in learning this new skill set. And that's, I think, that was one of my first questions is, do I want to invest the time and the energy in learning this skill set, or do I want to hire somebody to do it? And the decision was very quick. I wanted to hire somebody, and it was him. And I know I'm capable of learning it, but I didn't want to direct my time or my energy to that. I wanted to direct it to what I already knew energized me, what I knew I could share that other people couldn't. And if somebody else could do this technical stuff, the production, I was more than happy to offload it.
It's a really integral decision.
Yeah. And I think that was really, there was no point. I've had my doubts and a lot of doubts over now in season 4, but none of them were about that aspect. I still get joy in recording it, in writing the episodes and interviewing people. But I think had I bitten off more than I could chew with the production, would I have made it to 7? Probably not.
It's really important for one person shows, literally, in this case, podcast show, right? For us, we were 3. And I think that allowed us to divide and conquer in a way, Leo, right? I like learning those kind of things. And then Leo and Mike take care of the planning and inviting the guests. But when you're only one person, you can't do everything. And I think that's a really smart decision.
I think so. And it applies to a lot of other things in a teacherpreneurship. I know Jessie mentioned how much she loves that term. And I know you didn't coin it, but it's a fantastic one.
Don't spread that around. We absolutely did not. No.
Since we just start talking about these first steps, let's talk about first steps, first sales, maybe first wins, because normally when we talk to teachers who've thought about starting something, a lot of them struggle with taking those very first few steps. Perhaps you could walk us through what your timeline was like, Catherine, from having the idea to actually executing it.
Whoa, going back in time, I think it was just, you guys were actually pivotal in a lot of those steps because teachers are educated to teach. They're not educated to run a business. So things like creating a newsletter and do you or don't you want to have a website? What social media platform do you want to be present on? Do you want to do all of them or are you overextending yourself? Do you want to pick one and see how it goes if that's where your audience is? So I think, credit where credit is due. You guys really helped me with that. So thank you. So I think I'm just a very organized person. And so it was very methodical. Okay, let me start with this. And then let me start with that. So I actually decided I jumped in and created a web page. And that's not for everybody, but it was for me. And it was also a platform that allowed me to create my newsletter and to host the podcast. Mm-hmm. So people can go to the website and they can access everything about me and Here You Go podcast and how to work with me. So that was a decision that I made for me that worked for me. And then it was just applying those other principles that again, you guys really helped so many of us in the program with, which was be consistent, be committed, and also be constantly reflecting. And so when you feel those doubts, look at the metrics. What are the metrics telling you? Are you seeing patterns over time? So I guess the other thing I would say is I learned very early on to not take anything personally. Mm. And in a business, you have to. But when it's your voice, you're the teacher. Of course, when you get rejection, when you get no's, or when the podcast is only downloaded 200 times, you think, oh my God, it's me. They hate me. Instead of, maybe this topic didn't resonate with them. Or maybe it was a holiday weekend in Europe, and so nobody was listening because they were all doing family things. Or so you have to get beyond the it's all about me instead of there are ebbs and flows, and look for the patterns and based on that.
Since we're on the topic of patterns now and how you started the business, what did you, I don't remember actually, but what did you sell first and how did you find your first client? Do you remember that?
Yeah, actually, my very first private client was actually somebody in one of your earlier programs. Do you remember when of course you do, it was your program, but you had a program for students that was adjacent to your program for teachers. You had a community.
The SDLP probably, right?
Oh yeah, the self-directed learning portal, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and somebody in there, he reached out to me. He was an engineer, and he became my first solo client. So again, it all goes back to you guys. Thank you. Props.
I like that.
And then, interestingly enough, the next group that opened up to me, the next sales I did, were teachers that I had been learning with alongside in your program, reading the books we did together. And I believe she might, I don't want to speak out of turn, but it's the wonderful Fernanda, English teacher, Brazil.
She's coming on the show, by the way.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, I didn't want to pressure her, but she reached out to me. And I have to admit, I thought, what do I have to offer you? That was my initial reaction. Why? Your English is wonderful. You're marvelous. And from my work with her, that was actually another pivotal moment, teaching journey, because she wanted to work a lot on her pronunciation. But I think that's how she, again, I hate talking about her. It was like for so many learners, it was confidence than anything else. And having the confidence. And as somebody who speaks at this point 4 other languages, I understand that. When you're in the hot seat, you're speaking one of these other languages, that's really unnerving. And especially when you're doing it on a podcast, when you're teaching big classes, big workshops, and working on pronunciation, less about the sounds, the specific sounds, but about just creating a sense of ease. And so from there, things expanded to the point now where sure, I get some people who are working with North American doctors. They're doing medical English. They want to work on their pronunciation. But more than anything, I get a lot of clients who are highly proficient English language teachers who want an opportunity to be a student again. They want to be playful. They want to be playful in English. They want to explore it. They want to make mistakes. They want to go beyond. Yeah, some of the advanced tests, they get very out of date very fast. And so to be able to say to somebody like you or me, do people really go around saying the cherry on top? Come on, nobody says that anymore. They say the bonus is, or something like that. So to have the cultural context from an English dominant country to say, yeah, no, you can toss that one in the trash. That's not really useful anymore outside of a Cambridge exam.
So very
Was Fernanda your first teacher client?
Yes.
Okay.
She was.
And not to single her out, but it sounds like then another one came behind her who had similar attributes, let's say, another one behind her. Because we're getting into the niche discussion, right? Everyone talks about how do you find your niche? Do you chicken and the egg? I pick one and then I go find people like that. But it sounds like usually how it goes more organically. And I'm reading on your LinkedIn profile. So this is leading to the question of you help people to calm their inner critic and ditch imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Did those lines come from like working with people like these teachers you mentioned? And then from that you were maybe surprised and then you learned that there was a group of people, a niche, let's say, that existed after the surprise of finding them that way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I kept having to bite my tongue every time somebody would reach out to me and say, I need help, because I think that context in an English-speaking country like Canada is that on a day-to-day basis, we have the privilege of hearing English in so many of its beautiful forms, so many accents, whether those are regionalisms or due to the fact that we're an immigrant-heavy country. And what I realized was that a lot of that imposter syndrome, a lot of that criticism that these English language teachers were having stemmed from an unreasonable expectation that they attain a level of perfection. And that I always felt, walk with me in my world, honey, because you are so far and above so many people I encounter on a daily basis. You really do not need to be beating yourself up. And I think ultimately, again, going back to, I think, your first episode in this series, you talked about mission and values. And I think that's my number one mission, is to try to spread this gospel that when we speak of English as a global language, it is. And it is so diverse. And if we start from that premise, then hopefully we stop getting hung up on imposter syndrome and this desire to be perfect.
And where do you think this, I'm actually curious now about that. Where do you think this level of perfection, or this idealized, this perfectionism, where do you think that stems from, Catherine, especially working with the clients that you work? Why do you think a lot of them have this, I would say it's almost like a mindset that they feel like they need to speak the language to, I would say, almost to this level where you are flawless. And we all know that no one can actually communicate that way.
Yeah, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. Because, of course, we know that a lot of people are on social media. And also, I think social media can be a wonderful community, but it can be highly toxic. And I know that some of those teachers have come to me having experienced horrific online toxic messages. And again, why do people feel compelled to do that? I don't know.
Wow.
And I think, of course, if one is personally attacked for, oh, you don't pronounce it that way, how can you call yourself a C2 teacher if you make that pronounce? It's so infantile. And again, going back to my mission, like, walk in my shoes.
Yeah.
It doesn't impede communication. But I understand from a professional point of view, a lot of advanced English language teachers living in other countries, of course, you want to project the most professional voice possible because they're trying to attract their own clientele. I think it was one of your guests, Robin Walker and Gemma Archer. I was really stopped in my tracks when they said, you have to recognize that for some people, they do want to attain a level of pronunciation that is as close to native as possible. And it's not fair to say, oh, don't worry about that. If it's really meaningful to them, you have to listen to what people want. And now you could choose not to be the person to help them solve that problem, but you can't ignore their wishes and their desires. So that was another thing I've learned along the way, is I might be able to say, don't worry, you're doing fine. But if they don't believe it themselves, then let's find a way to help them get to that level of confidence.
Reason would suggest, to me at least, that some level of imposter syndrome is good, is a positive. Leo and I are big fans of Adam Grant's work. I don't know if you've read his books or seen his talks, where he has the Dunning-Kruger effect. He didn't invent it, obviously, but he talks about it. And he has this, I don't know how, a diagram or something, and these quadrants where you have blind arrogance to your skills, where your level of confidence greatly outweighs your competence in said area. Armchair quarterback is the analogy, right? Or you're not the one actually doing it, but you think you could do it. Versus confident humility, which is where he argues most people should be, where you know that you're good at something, but you know that there's room to grow as well, which I always found really interesting. Because I think when people say, I need to get rid of my imposter syndrome, for the examples that you've given here, of course, that makes sense. But I do think that there's some of it that we should hang on to that just is that little reminder that there's more that I don't know, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think psychology would, Adam Grant is a behavioral psychologist, so of course he's well versed in the psychology behind that. And yes, in my program, with my listening and discussion program for women, the first podcast we listened to with this group was about changing our personality and measuring it on the ocean scale. So we won't go into that now, but N standing for neuroticism, which essentially informs this trait of imposter syndrome or the inner critic, and it's the source of our anxiety. And so exactly without that anxiety, we would just sit around watching TV and eating chocolate all day. We need a level of anxiety to get us off the couch, to do the uncomfortable things, to learn a language, right? An uncomfortable thing to do and to test out that language. So anxiety is a good driver, but you can't let it cripple you. And that's the fine balance.
And since you were talking about these teachers that you've been working with, and this new program that you've designed, I think it's called WILDE, right?
It is.
Yes.
Women into listening to and discovering English.
Yes, wild name indeed. When you started working with these teachers, when you started figuring out what your niche was, Catherine, was it easy for you to charge for your work, or did that take some mindset work as well?
Yeah, I still struggle with that. But again, I think that I learned a lot from, again, you guys. I think that currency, I would say, is a big issue. Currency exchange. I live and work in Canada. I make American dollars and Canadian dollars. It's a strong currency. And so I have to be mindful of that. But I think every year I've had a goal, a financial goal. And I would hope that most teacherpreneurs do that they establish what their goal is and then work backwards. And, okay, what do I need to do? So if that means I need to charge more, or I need to teach more, or I need to offer this course more than twice a year, maybe 3 times a year. You make those calculations. But sometimes I think I'm not the right person to ask the money question of, because I'm not motivated by a desire to make a gazillion dollars. To me, my goals are pretty attainable. I've made sure at least that they are. And yes, raising my fees initially, having been a teacher in the non-for-profit sphere and working in non-for-profit, I had to get over that, oh yes, we're in the nonprofit sector, therefore we don't make any money, mindset to, I'm running a business, I have a skill set that I'm good at, and how do I convince people that it's worth their investment? Sure, again, not taking it personally when someone says, sorry, you're too expensive for me. Again, I used to, for a second, consider, I'll give you a discount. Now I don't, because I also stopped panicking. You need to I think of myself a lot as a tortoise instead of a hare. You've just got to wait, and the right people are going to come. If you stay consistent with your messaging, if you stay committed to your mission, if you are okay to pivot if something's not working, but don't compromise on your value.
I like that. I like that. You use the word attainable, which I think is perfect. Because we hear this a lot from teachers, what you just said, I'm not trying to make a gazillion dollars. Great. Because none of us are. Mm-hmm. But if
we're in the wrong industry, for sure.
Right. And some people are, like people on Shark Tank and whatever, but they would say that a gazillion dollars is attainable for them. So it's a different context. I think attainable is a perfect word for what you want to do. It makes me think of the mission, which is almost always client facing. What is the value I want to add to people's lives? How do I want to help them? But I think as teacherpreneurs, we also, if we're going to use that word, we need to have our own mission to, I don't know if you subscribe to the adage of, if I don't help myself, then I can't help the people who I help either. And there's this thing with money and education where it makes a lot of people feel a little bit odd or strange. And usually the mission of helping people supersedes the financial mission, which is ultimately, I think, a good thing. But if you follow what you said and say, oh, I can work backwards on my plan and I can charge for this and I want to make this much money, and put a plan in place to help people to do, that seems like a nice balance to me. Because it's not what's the word? It's not like a missionary to work for free and just help people, because if your goal is to make a little bit of money as well, they both need to go hand in hand.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. But it goes back to what we said earlier. Did your family respect your desire to be a teacher? Sometimes I think people don't understand what we do. We forget what it's like. We've only experienced education as the student. Very few people are teachers, but there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. And I think the more we talk about our value, the more we talk about what's happening beyond a social media post, the hours you invest to produce podcasts that you guys are doing, the hours you invest to listening to a multitude of podcasts based on what I know my learners are interested in, so that I can evaluate them and make sure that this is the right resource for them to get the results that I've promised them. So there's so much that happens that is never visible. And that gets calculated into that. This is my fee. And I think we should probably talk about it a lot more often than we do.
Yeah. Agree. Is a huge, first of all, I agree. Nobody knows what I do for a living. You talk to my parents or my friends, what is your job? I don't know.
That is very true. That's very true.
This is
well,
not
how many jobs do you have? Like, basically, like how many jobs? Like you're always working on these different things. Is it learn your English? What is this? What is it like? Is it your teaching assignment? What is it? What is it that you do?
This is not my idea, but I've heard this and I think it's really funny. A good idea for a podcast is millennials explaining to their parents what they do for a living, because it doesn't make any sense. There's a generation gap that it doesn't compute, because it doesn't. Like on Mondays and Wednesdays, I teach a class, and then I'm in podcasting, and then how do you make money?
That's a different story. Yeah. Let's not get into that. The money will come. The money will come. But I wanted to get into some of the bumps that a lot of teachers, myself included, Andrew and you, Catherine, we have all encountered along the way. What were some of those hurdles for you? Because I remember you were talking about your skill set that you had developed. But when you started this idea of running your own business, working for yourself, ditching the school, what kind of obstacles did you face? Was it mostly like mental? For a lot of teachers, it's this mental block. A lot of teachers feel like, I can't not do this. What was it for you?
I think that my early frustrations I attribute them to, I'll go back to that analogy of the tortoise and the hare. I burst out of the gate like a hare, and it was, okay, I'm going to create the podcast, and then I'm going to create this community where I'm going to have this thing that allows passive income, and people are going to buy a subscription to it, and then we're going to have these meetings once a month, and they're just all going to love it. People don't like to pay for something they can get for free first. And so it was disappointing. I thought, I had these dreams of this passive income that would be adjacent to the podcast. And I didn't allow myself the time to let that develop organically. I think that was my biggest error from the get-go. And it was hard to let those things go, precisely because I thought, but I know this adds value. Why can't people see that this adds value? And then I thought, I can't. I can only change my reaction to this if I'm putting in this time and I'm not reaping any rewards, then it's time to just cut it off. So that was, I think, my first real hurdle. Okay. And it's taken a very long time for this tortoise to start to make some passive income off her podcast. But that went back to my mindset, because I realized my podcast is my lead magnet. It's not my source of income. It is a way for people to find me, and the right people to find me. And so that made a world of difference. And I don't have those same doubts about why am I creating this? I know exactly who I'm creating this for, and that it doesn't make me thousands of dollars. In fact, it makes me pennies is not the point. It's a lead magnet, and that's a good product. It comes out consistently. People know what to expect, but there's always an element of surprise. So that definitely hurdle number one. Sometimes I do get oh, sorry, you want to ask me a question?
No, continue. Go ahead. I do, but I'll wait till you're finished.
Okay. I think that every once in a while, I get jealous. Even though I said from the get-go I didn't want to be a podcast influencer, there are moments when I think, what does Mel Robbins have that I don't have? Like these top 10, top 20 podcasters, why is it that they're everywhere at the top of the charts? But then I think, Catherine, you don't want to be at the top of the charts because that comes with a whole other series of problems. And that's not what I'm here for. I'm a teacher. And so, yeah, that was definitely...
I don't think you can go back. If I ever interviewed someone famous, like really famous, I have this question canned. I would ask them and I would say, is fame worth it? Because I don't think you can't go back once you attain that level. Like I remember watching this interview with Matthew Perry a few years ago. I'll never forget it. And he was talking about like he was writing a script for something, and his writing partner was like a director. Like he was well known in the industry, but not like publicly famous. And they were like on a stumbling block, creative block, and they couldn't get over it. And the friend was like, hey, whenever I get stuck, I just go for a walk, clear my head, and an idea comes to me. Let's just go for a 20-minute walk around the block. And Matthew Perry was like, yeah, I can't do that. He can't go in public just to go for a walk because
everybody's going to mob him. Exactly.
And I think getting clear on what you want. If you want to be Mel Robbins, I think there are things you could do to get there. But although being jealous, I think, is a human condition too. Like imposter syndrome, a little bit probably is okay.
Exactly. Yep. Any other things that made me go, that didn't work out? Collaboration. I believe really strongly in collaborating with other teachers and trying to give people a platform, which is why I've had a lot of non-native English teachers on my podcast. But I also collaborated with a few people who reached out to me, and I felt like I had to say yes, even though it didn't feel like the right fit. And I've now learned to be much more careful about who I say yes to. Isn't going to support my business, isn't going to support what I want to project out to the world. So that would be another where I was like, oh, geez, that was a mistake. But it was nothing that made me doubt the core of my business, the foundation of it.
What do you mean? Without getting into too much detail, if people are listening, what should they look for, or why is choosing the wrong person? What can happen?
I think that it just didn't. I discounted the desires of my listenership because I didn't want to say no. Because I thought maybe there'll be some value here, but it didn't. It was a square peg, round hole kind of thing. And it was nothing that brought about disaster, but it just was like, that podcast really didn't do very well. And you just, okay, whatever. There are going to be some songs that aren't a hit on an album, right? So you just, again, don't take it personally, but do better next time. Ask better questions about why they want to be on your podcast. Ask better questions about what their purpose is. Be clear on what yours are and be sure to know why they've reached out. Is it just for promotion? They really fit with your niche, fit with your messaging.
Leo can tell you, we could share off recording a few examples, I think.
Yes, I think the biggest lesson for me is to always be ruthless to the things that don't really add value to your business or to your mission or to who you are. So I've learned to be very ruthless. So I think we want to talk about the lead magnet syndrome. I want to go back to that because I feel like we both have the same question. Do you want to?
Go for it.
No, you go for it. I feel like you...
I wasn't going to ask about that. I was going to ask about something else.
I wanted to ask you about the lead magnet. I think it's important I think it's something that maybe a lot of teachers who are starting their business don't seem to have a lot of clarity on. So perhaps you could walk us through how you came to the realization that the podcast was or is a very good lead magnet to your business. Because I don't know if Andrew's going to agree with me, but teachers are constantly going back and forth with what their lead magnet is. For us, the lead magnet is also the podcast. That's what we do. That's how people know about us. But what was that process like for you, Catherine? How did you come to that realization?
It came very quickly because I was constantly frustrated with feeling like I had to create free content on social media. And I felt like I was doing something, again, that didn't feel right. Why am I going to create a 10 carousel post about this or that, or do a reel about this or that again, when I have already invested time and money and energy in creating an audio resource that is really good and that allows people to, if they listen over time, just like we listen to you guys, we get to know who you are. And so in getting to know your personalities, what kinds of questions you ask, what makes you laugh, what makes you think, those are the things that people connect with. Of course, there's your niche. They're not going to come to me if they want to pass an exam. I don't do exam prep. But if they want to come to me to work on, to be a student again as an advanced English teacher, they know, oh, Catherine really likes to read. She talks a lot about books. Catherine likes to focus on this issue. I remember she's talked about the importance of listening because they get to know you. Now, for me, that's the podcast. And if other teachers want to dedicate their time to creating reels and posts and whatnot on social media, because that is their lead magnet, all the power to them. But I think going back to what you just said, Leo, about being ruthless and what's working for you and what's not, it's really important not to spread yourself too thin. And so you can't be on every platform every day doing different things. Pick one or pick where your people are. Just don't overextend, because then you, I think, dilute your message.
Yes.
And you can't be everything to everyone. That's another thing you guys really taught me. You can't work for everybody. You're going to work for somebody. And yeah, that was how I came to the conclusion was, no, this is what's going to bring people to me. And over time, it's proven correct.
Over time. Yeah, I remember usually, to be honest, recommend a podcast not being a lead magnet for many people, only because it does take so much time to usually curate an audience that you're looking for. But if you love it and you're good at it, which you are, and you can stick with it, I think that's the main criteria. I 100% agree that any lead magnet is just how do you get people to understand you as a person? Because being completely honest, there's no niche that people haven't tried. Like, you're going to have competition. You're going to have other people within it. And ultimately, people aren't going to choose, I need IELTS prep, so therefore, no, it's here are my 29 options. And who do I connect with? And different people will connect with different things, but just who you are and how do you get that out there in a podcast is a wonderful option to get. And it is evergreen. It will stay there forever. And I'm sure you do. We have people going back and listening to episodes from years ago that we don't forget who we interviewed, but are not top of mind, let me say. Oh, you discovered us from that episode. Cool. That's awesome.
Exactly. Yeah. I think there's a lot of value, but I hear what you're saying. It's not for everybody for so many reasons. But with that realization came a lot more freedom and a lot more ability for me to use my time in ways that, again, I felt better about. Okay, the podcast is taken care of. Why would I spend another hour trying to replicate a similar message by a reel when I could either do something to prepare for my course or I could actually take on another private client in that hour? So it's being strategic and ruthless, but it does take time.
How much time? Leo, between the two of us to get one of these episodes ready for distribution, I approximate between 8 and 10 hours per episode we spend on it.
Yeah. I spend at least like an hour or two just reading up. Sometimes, depending on the guest, I have to read
just on
for
the prep, yeah.
Yeah, 5, 6 hours reading, 10 hours depending on the guest. BVP, I had to basically spend like a month preparing for that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Then there's the recording, obviously, then the editing, then the clips, the redistribution, the art. We do website, YouTube, audio, contacting the guests to get their approval, getting their package. Like, it's a lot. Yeah.
It's a big job. Takes up a lot of time. But again, if you don't love it, then maybe it's time to reevaluate. But for you guys, it seems to just really be, I know your podcast adds value to so many people, especially you're interviewing teachers now, but your series of doing researchers is pivotal for so many of us who might have chosen to constantly stay in university studying linguistics, but we can't stay in university forever. And having an opportunity to sit in on a class listening to a Learn Your English podcast is invaluable. And,
Thank you.
I think I try to do that by interviewing teachers too. It's okay, what nugget of knowledge can this person share that's going to ripple throughout the teacher community and help somebody feel better?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. I want to fast forward a little bit here. I know Andrew's still thinking there, but I know you've built a wonderful brand for yourself with your one-to-one work, with your podcast, Here You Go, and the listening festival, the WILDE. Can you perhaps walk us through how you've made this entire ecosystem work? I feel like that's something that I'm very curious about, and I think a lot of teachers are also very curious about. A similar question to what we asked a lot of our guests. How do you make all of these pieces move together to build or to have a business that is very much aligned with your vision and your mission?
If for other teachers, pronunciation is the foundation, for me, listening is the foundation. And so really keeping that front and center of we want listening to be the focus. We want to continue to talk about how listening to a variety of global Englishes on a variety of topics. And more than anything, I realized I was working with primarily women. I do have some male clients, but the majority of my clients are women. And that, again, women-hosted podcasts, global English, these are the things that drive the Listening Festival. It's what drives my one-on-one work. Of course, each individual teacher has their own interests and goals, so that dictates the kinds of things we do. No one client will look the same as another. And then the podcast is a reflection of that. I'm constantly trying. If I have questions about something, I know that the people I work with will also have similar questions, or they'll want to know more. And so it's let's get a taste of what this is all about. And it's a way for people to then go and look into it on their own if they're curious to learn more. If not, they've had a taste of a topic and they're ready to move on. So how does it all connect? I think it's just I try to keep those things front and center. The importance of listening, the importance of listening to English as a lingua franca, the importance of elevating women's voices, listening to women's voices, sharing perspectives, and constantly, my job to be an active listener, constantly listening to what people are telling me so that if I need to pivot, if I need to change, because I'm noticing changes in what people are asking for, can I pivot to help them meet that new need or that different need that I hadn't considered before? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does.
Sure.
It does. And I was thinking because one of the things I find perhaps most fascinating about this world of entrepreneurship, specifically in education, is how there's not one specific model in which we can do things. I feel like every teacher that is running a business is running a business on a very different model, on a model that aligns not only with their lifestyle, but also with the kind of person that they are, with their personalities. I find it insightful when I ask teachers these questions, because again, not everyone is going to have the exact same model. And I think it's really, I would say it's important for teachers to understand that this is not a cookie cutter type of approach to business where you just buy a franchise, and then you're just like basically reproducing the exact same thing, like a McDonald's or a Big Mac, not Big Mac. What's the name of the other one? What's the other one? The other burger place. I forget now. I don't even try that.
Like Burger King.
My kids love it. Burger King. I call it Big Mac, but it's Burger King. I've never been to a Burger King in my life, just so you know.
Never had a Whopper?
Yeah, they have a Whopper there, yeah. But I think that's the interesting thing. I think that's the most fascinating thing about entrepreneurship in education is that no two teachers will have the exact same business model. And I think learning more about how you make the wheels move for your business, I think it's really important. And I think it's a conversation that we need to consistently have with teachers who are considering doing this or have been doing this and they don't know where to go next. Because we know that businesses are constantly evolving, and so have your businesses, Catherine. But also the challenges you will basically face new challenges as you grow, which brings me to the next question. What's the biggest challenge that you're facing now in your business?
Oh, maybe. Honestly, things feel really good right now. And maybe that's not the right answer, but I think my husband, let me give him a bit of credit. He's been a businessman his whole professional life, and he's always worked for himself. And years ago, actually right after the financial crisis in 2008, we had a conversation and he said, if I'm going to worry in the good times and worry in the bad times, when am I living? Like, you have to, in the good times, recognize that they're good and they're working for you. You've put up boundaries. You've done the best you can. And that's how I feel right now, today. I feel good. I feel like the podcast is in a good position. My course is in a good position. My schedule is in balance in a way that I feel I never feel pressured right now that's not true. Some Saturdays I've got to work, but that's when you work for yourself. Sometimes you've got to do that. Does that mean I don't think there will be something coming around the corner in a month or two? Of course, something's going to come. Something's going to have to change. Where I'm at now, having the tools to know that, okay, if things start to go downhill, how are you going to implement some changes? Who are you going to ask? Also, you got to ask the people you work with, what's not working? Or why did this not work? Challenges right now, except maybe thinking about, it's the constant question I have, which is at the release of every episode, are they going to like it? Are they going to like it? But I don't know. I feel bad saying it.
That's a great answer.
I think the challenge.
I love this series because everyone's doing it, has a different answer. And I hope we're highlighting different, like Leo said, different business models, different people doing different things. It's not all like you have to teach one-to-one. You can have a podcast. You can have different things. Maybe that's the challenge is waiting for the next challenge.
Or the challenge is just accepting that things are good. It's just like easing your mind, which is something that when you run a business, I feel like it's really difficult to do. At least in my perspective. Yeah.
And maybe the more I think about it right now in this moment, I think it's also giving me some time to be creative. So I'm reading more right now. I have a little bit more time in my schedule to be reading more. And of course, every time I read a new book, it gives me new ideas about, I want to learn more about this. Maybe this would be a topic that would resonate with listeners. Maybe this is worth exploring to do an episode about, or listening to new podcasts that somebody recommended. And, okay, why are these? I feel like I've got a little bit of time right now to maybe do that reflective work that is also a part of the behind the scenes, because you can't keep recycling the same stuff. Teachers, I believe that. They're things you fall back on, but you gotta, and maybe that's also a factor of my age. I don't want to be left behind culturally. I want to know what's in the zeitgeist. I need to know, what are the millennials listening to? What are they thinking about? These are, if I'm helping teachers stay current in their English, I got to be current in the culture right now. So
it's what I remember Robert Greene talking about, this concept of generational myopia. And it's a real thing, because I feel like eventually as we get older, we get lost. We start talking about, oh, my generation did things this way. But in reality, every generation is dealing with different problems, different challenges. And I think the only way for us to stay relevant is to just really avoid this kind of generational myopia, as it describes. But since you were talking about reflection and all this time that you have, we are actually running out of time. So I wanted to get to like maybe 2 or 3 final questions that we would like to ask you before someone answers the door there. I think
Yeah.
I love that we have a ding dong there.
That's
I
the
think
bell. It's out of time. It's over. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I go first?
Yeah, please go ahead.
You've used the word pivot a lot, Catherine, in our conversation today. And this kind of keeping up with changes culturally maybe is one example of that. For people listening, so we started, maybe this is a full circle moment, right? You started the show by describing how the podcast started aimed at an audience that turned out to be not your people, right? Not the direction. You were able to pivot, get off of that. And you've had different directions and different pivots along the way. What is your mechanism, or what have you learned? I think you and I are both believers in these are all concepts in entrepreneurship that until you really experience it and go through it, it's really hard to develop the skill of it, even if we understand it conceptually. What have you learned if someone's listening who hasn't really started or is at the very beginning, and like all of us, when we start, we want to be sure of what we're doing, and that's impossible in a working for yourself environment. What have you learned about pivoting and changing direction that if someone's at the beginning, you can advise them on?
And here I'm going to use a sports analogy, which is, of course, what I think about when I think of pivot. And believe it or not, I'm 5'2", but I did play basketball when I was younger. And so to me, you pivot in basketball, but you've got one foot on the court and you're just moving your other foot, right? You're not changing the court. You're not changing the game. You're not going from basketball to hockey. You're not going from hockey to football. If my business is my basketball court, then I'm moving around that space. So I'm not completely abandoning my values, my mission, my vision. I'm just responding to where others are in this sports court and changing. So I would say to a lot of teachers, you don't necessarily have to abandon the whole thing if there's some solid foundations there. That's certainly been my experience. I didn't abandon the game. I just moved position.
Love it.
Okay. I like
really
that
mini
too.
follow-up. How long did you wait before you made that call? Because I know for all of us, it's easy to fall in love with our own idea. And there's at least for me, there's that voice. If maybe if I hang with it a little bit longer, it'll change. And then there's the other voice that's kind of, I just need to pivot now and cut bait and change. How long did you wait? Or rather, what voice in your head allowed you to say, no, this is the time to change now?
Honestly, it was practicality in terms of the community that I built on Patreon. It was, do I renew my payment? I was like, nope, I'm not going to spend the money to renew that. So that was pretty clear cut. It just didn't seem to be worth it. In terms of how I then changed the language and the content of the podcast, that evolved. It was like, okay, I've written this as an A2 document. It doesn't feel right. How would I use it if I was speaking to somebody else? Okay, let me level up this English so it's more me. And so it was much more organic.
My last question, I think the last question that we have time for, it's actually a very simple one, and it speaks to something that you have been helping teachers with, like tapping a little bit into the whole imposter syndrome and being consistent, being committed. What do you wish more teachers believed about their own potential?
I think about this a lot because my first career was in international development, and I very quickly got a little cynical and realized my goal should be to make myself redundant, and that the people living in those communities were the best to make decisions about their own communities. And I have got to admit, the more I interact with the teachers I work with, English teachers in Europe, English teachers in Brazil primarily, I believe the future of ELT is there. I see what these teachers are doing in terms of transforming English language education in a way that is just breaking boxes of what we think education should be. So I wish they could see how their transformation, how all of their development that they have done to teach language in a way that is reactive, that is informed by theory but good practice, it's so much better than what a lot of people are getting in a classroom in Canada. It's a shame that we can't serve people in Canada the way I see these teachers serving people in Brazil. So I really do think the future is there. And so I wish they would believe that. I wish they knew how incredible they are.
Love it. Maybe we should, off air, talk about a collaboration, because I know Leah and I's new mini mission is to have that happen here in Canada. Because it's really what do you call it, Leah? Like a wasteland of ELT?
I have a few who describe ELT and it's funny because I moved to Canada because I didn't think that staying in Brazil, I would be able to make any sort of changes to the landscape of language education there. And when I moved here and I got deeper into ELT here, I realized, wow, things here are actually much more precarious in terms of how teachers approach language education in the classroom as compared to places like Brazil. And I remember talking to a good friend of mine who is based in the UK, and I'm not going to mention his name here because of what he said, but when we were speaking about the quality of teaching and teachers around the world, one of the things he had said to me is that, believe it or not, some of the best teachers I've ever worked with were non-native speakers, first and foremost, because they take their job very seriously. They really believe in the power and the transformative power of education. And because they're constantly studying, they're constantly trying to get better at their craft. Whereas here, what we see is just a lot of moaning and complaining and very little work being done on improving themselves, not only as people, but also as educators. Yeah, and he described that as a wasteland.
Maybe there's an idea somewhere where we can bring this podcast world and that, not exclusively Brazilian, but that concept of really great professionals and bring them together somehow. I don't know how exactly, but it's needed in Canada. It's needed.
It really is.
Leo lied. Last question, because we're asking this, almost forgot. We're asking this to every guest, and we have not got the same answer twice, which is exciting, because we're trying to, maybe if we can put it together into a little montage or something. But the main purpose of this series, well, we have many purposes of this series, but highlight different voices, different business models, different niches, just different ways that people do it. As Leo said, there isn't one way. But also to, as you mentioned, Catherine, earlier, emphasize or just discuss what goes on behind the scenes and what many of you may not know. So for you, if someone were to shadow you for a week behind the scenes of your business, what might they be surprised by?
They'd probably be surprised at the number of times I listen to the audios that the people I work with send me. It is really something that, I might listen to an audio 10 times to provide the feedback that I feel responsible to give them. So that definitely, I never share how much I do that. And I think they might also, again, I mean, I talked about this earlier, shadowing me for a day, the inspiration I get from just my day-to-day activities that reaffirm why I do what I do. So if I go to the gym and I work out, and the teacher's been in Canada for 25 years, but came originally from Palestine, and she's got her lovely accent, and she's communicating to a class of 35 students, and everybody's doing what she tells us, is it that, like, I am constantly reminded of the connectivity of language, and that it keeps me going. It's all about that connection. It's not about perfection. It's just the connection.
Love it.
That's good. That's good. Well, Catherine, thank you very much for coming on the show. We've been wanting to interview you for such a long time. And when we conceptualized the idea for this series, you were, just so you know, you were probably one of the first people that we thought of having on the show. So thank you for making the time for us.
Oh, thank you. And I really can't emphasize enough how so much of where I am today is thanks to the questions you asked, the things you posed, the community you created. Without you guys, I'm not sure I would be where I am today. So I am deeply indebted to everything I've learned from you.
I'm not sure that's true, but we'll take the compliment. Thank you.
Oh,
I think you would be right where you are.
Oh, I don't know. No, I don't know. I don't know about that. But I really, hats off to both of you.